There are trucks that people buy, and then there are trucks that people bet their livelihood on when everything else around them has already fallen apart. What if the most indestructible vehicles ever assembled on a production line were never the ones celebrated in commercials, never the ones parked outside luxury dealerships, but instead the ones quietly working in oil fields, mountain roads, and war zones while the rest of the world looked the other way? These 5 pickup trucks earned a kind of reputation that no marketing budget can manufacture and no single test drive can reveal. We are talking about machines that survived conditions that would reduce most vehicles to scrap metal within months, and kept running for decades without apology. Some of them carry engineering secrets that even experienced mechanics overlook. Others have histories so surprising that automotive journalists rarely mention them because the stories sound too extreme to be believable. Before we get into the first truck on this list, and the hidden detail inside its frame will genuinely change the way you think about what a truck is built to do, make sure you subscribe to this channel, hit that like button right now, and drop a comment below telling us which pickup truck you believe is the most indestructible machine ever built. Stay locked in, because the truck coming up in position 2 has a survival record that reads more like a military report than a vehicle review, and we are just getting started. The Ford F-250 Super Duty was born from a decision that most people in the automotive industry in 1998 considered unnecessarily aggressive, and that decision is the reason this truck still appears decade after decade on every serious list of long-term reliability. Ford engineers concluded that the existing F-Series platform had reached a structural ceiling that no incremental update could raise, so they abandoned it entirely and designed the Super Duty on a fully boxed high-strength steel ladder frame built from the ground up for one specific purpose: to absorb decades of punishment without accumulating the kind of hidden structural fatigue that eventually turns a hard-working truck into a liability. That frame was not simply heavier than what competitors offered. It was engineered with a controlled flex specification derived directly from real-world fleet data gathered from municipal governments, oil field operators, and agricultural businesses who documented every single mechanical failure across their entire vehicle inventories. What that data revealed was that torsional stress accumulated over thousands of hours of uneven terrain driving was destroying trucks long before their engines gave out, and the fully boxed frame was the direct engineering answer to that specific finding. And this is where things get genuinely interesting, because Ford did not stop at the frame. The 6.7-liter Power-stroke diesel engine introduced in 2011 was manufactured entirely in-house and built around a compacted graphite iron block, a material so thermally stable and dense that it is used in marine engines and industrial generators where failure is simply not an option. Fleet operators in oilfield services have documented F-250 examples crossing 400,000 miles with original engines still holding compression within factory specification, which is a number that becomes truly astonishing once you understand what kind of working conditions those trucks experienced to accumulate it. Most drivers never realize that the solid front axle on the F-250, a design choice that many modern buyers overlook in favor of independent suspension, is actually one of the most celebrated details among fleet mechanics because it has fewer failure points, distributes load more evenly across rough surfaces, and can be rebuilt in the field with basic hand tools when independent suspension alternatives would require a specialized shop and weeks of downtime. The Toyota Helix holds a category of reputation that no other pickup truck on the planet has ever reached, and the most remarkable part of that story is that it was never built on a single dramatic engineering breakthrough but on something far more difficult to replicate: an unwavering commitment to validating every single component through testing cycles so long and so demanding that competitors measured similar processes in hundreds of hours while Toyota measured them in thousands. The Helix has been in continuous production since 1968, making it one of the longest-running vehicle nameplates in automotive history, and over those decades it accumulated a real-world reliability record across more than 180 countries that reads less like a product brochure and more like a geopolitical document. In regions where road infrastructure is a loose concept, where temperatures swing between freezing nights and scorching afternoon heat within the same 24-hour window, and where the nearest qualified mechanic might be 400 kilometers away on a road that barely qualifies as a track. The Helix became the default answer because it was the vehicle most statistically likely to still be running when every alternative had already stopped. But there is one detail about the Helix that almost nobody talks about, and it concerns the way Toyota consistently specified suspension components with load ratings and material grades that exceeded what the published payload figures technically required, essentially engineering a margin of safety into every joint and every bushing that allowed the truck to absorb impacts well beyond its rated limit without the cumulative degradation that transforms a working truck into an expensive repair project. The BBC television program Top Gear spent an entire episode in 2003 trying to destroy a high-mileage Helix through submersion, fire, demolition impact, and tidal flooding, and the truck started and ran after every single attempt. An episode that has never been successfully replicated with any other production truck because no other production truck has produced the same result. If you are still watching and finding this as genuinely fascinating as we do, right now is the perfect moment to subscribe to this channel, like this video, share it with someone who is about to buy a truck or who simply needs to see this information, and drop a comment below telling us what has surprised you most so far. Because the next two trucks contain engineering details we almost could not believe were real when we first found them. The Ram 2500 carries inside it an engine that was never originally designed to live under a passenger vehicle hood, and that origin is the single most important thing to understand about why this truck has the long-term reliability record it does. The Cummins B-Series inline-six diesel that has powered the Ram heavy-duty lineup since the partnership launched in 1989 descends directly from an industrial engine architecture developed by Cummins for agricultural combines, marine vessels, and standby power generation systems, environments where an engine failure does not mean a roadside inconvenience but a catastrophic operational collapse with real financial and safety consequences. Every engineering decision in that engine reflects those industrial origins, from the forged steel crankshaft dimension far beyond what the factory power output requires to the cast iron block construction that resists warping and cracking under sustained thermal stress that aluminum alternatives begin to struggle with after years of maximum load service. What makes this even more extraordinary is that rather than developing an in-house diesel alternative the way most competitors eventually chose to do, Ram committed to the Cummins relationship across multiple decades and multiple emissions regulatory cycles, continuously refining the same fundamental engine architecture rather than abandoning it for something newer and less proven. The result of that sustained investment is a documented reliability record that owner communities have tracked in extraordinary detail online, with multiple verified examples crossing 500,000 miles on original internal components, and at least one documented Canadian agricultural operation that reached 600,000 miles before the owner voluntarily replaced the injectors as a preventive measure, not because of any measurable performance decline but simply because the components were old enough to make him uncomfortable heading into another working season. Ram also introduced coil spring rear suspension to the heavy-duty segment, a decision that traditional engineers initially dismissed as inappropriate for a working truck and that fleet data eventually vindicated completely, because the coil spring system delivered more consistent load control across uneven terrain while simultaneously reducing the driver fatigue that accumulates across long working days. And reduced driver fatigue in commercial fleet operation translates directly into fewer accidents and lower liability exposure, which is not a comfort conversation but a financial one. The Chevrolet Silverado HD carries an engineering lineage that most people trace back only as far as its most recent styling update. But the real story begins in the late 1990s in a collaboration between General Motors and Isuzu that produced one of the most consequential diesel engines ever installed in a North American production truck. The Duramax 6.6-liter engine that debuted in the 2001 Silverado HD was not an adaptation of anything either company already had. It was a clean sheet co-development that combined GM's powertrain integration expertise and production manufacturing scale with Isuzu's decades of diesel engineering experience accumulated in commercial truck applications across markets far more demanding on diesel reliability than North American consumer expectations had ever required. And this is where the Silverado HD story gets genuinely compelling. Because what most drivers never realize is the level of pre-production validation that GM requires before any heavy-duty truck earns approval for the assembly line. At the Milford Proving Ground in Michigan, prototype Silverado HD trucks undergo what engineers internally call the torture protocol, a compressed simulation of an entire working lifetime that includes sustained maximum payload operation over Belgian block road surfaces engineered to reproduce the worst rural road conditions in the country, repeated maximum grade towing cycles that hold engine and transmission temperatures at the upper limit of the acceptable operating range for hours without interruption, and cold start validation sequences conducted at -40°F that verify every lubrication pathway reaches critical components before the engine comes up to operating temperature. A single deviation outside the acceptable calibration window during any phase of that process sends the program back to the engineering team with no compromise and no averaging across multiple test runs. The Nissan Titan XD entered the market in 2016 with a concept that the conventional wisdom said would fail. Built on a fully boxed ladder frame with steel gauging heavier than most competitors used in their half-ton platforms and attached to that frame through 18 separate body mount points, 6 more than the segment average at the time. A detail that sounds purely numerical until you understand that more mount points distribute torsional stress across a broader contact area and directly slow the progression of metal fatigue in the frame and body over the vehicle's working life, which is the kind of advantage that never shows up in a test drive but shows up very clearly after 10 years of genuine work. What separates these 5 trucks from everything else in the market is not a single dramatic headline specification or a record-breaking performance figure captured on a dynamometer. It is the accumulation of hundreds of small engineering decisions, each one invisible in isolation, each one made by people who understood that the real measure of a truck is not how it performs on a press launch in perfect conditions but how it performs on the worst day of the decade in the hands of someone who absolutely cannot afford for it to stop. The Ford F-250 proves that abandoning a successful platform to start over from a blank sheet is sometimes the most responsible long-term decision a manufacturer can make. The Toyota Helix proves that a global reputation for indestructibility is not built in a laboratory but earned across generations in conditions that no internal test protocol can fully replicate. The Ram 2500 proves that committing to a long-term supplier partnership and investing in it continuously across multiple generations produces a caliber of engine reliability that isolated in-house development rarely matches. The Chevrolet Silverado HD proves that cross-border engineering collaboration, properly funded and properly managed, can produce results that neither partner could have reached independently. The Nissan Titan XD proves that identifying a genuine gap in the market and filling it with honest structural engineering choices, even when the conventional wisdom says the gap does not exist, is a strategy that the ownership data eventually validates regardless of what the early sales figures suggest. Every truck on this list was built by engineers who understood that the person buying it was not shopping for an image but investing in a working partner for conditions that genuinely matter, and that is a standard that never becomes outdated. If this video gave you something real to think about, subscribe to this channel right now so you never miss a story like this one. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who takes their truck seriously or is about to make an important purchase decision, and leave a comment below telling us which truck impressed you the most and exactly why, because we read every single comment and your answer might shape the next video we make.